Birgit Piskor and her garden are very much alike. Although relatively small in size, they both vibrate with enough energy, color, and enthusiasm to command attention. And the attention keeps coming, from magazines to television to national gardening awards. But for Birgit, the accolades are like pretty flowers that come and go with the season. It's the garden itself that holds the meaning and that has changed her life forever. To Canadian gardeners, Victoria, British Columbia is a floral mecca. A year-round mild climate ensures long growing seasons and near-perpetual petal color. Visitors from around the world come to walk, bike, and bus through the city's many famous gardens. But for the die-hard romantic, nothing beats a horse and buggy ride, leisurely trotting from one flowery destination to another. Although it compares little in size or scope to Victoria's best-known botanical beds, Birgit Piskor's garden has become one of the most popular stops on the Victoria tour scene. In 3 short years, Birgit has created a remarkable garden that has won the hearts and minds of tourists, recognition from the international media, and a prestigious gardening award. Although, truth be told, not everyone gets Birgit's garden.
Some people get my garden. Some people complain that there are too many plants, that that each plant doesn't stand on its own, isn't defined by space around it. I garden on a city lot, an average city lot, and the way my house is situated, the footprint is such that it's divided into 4 fairly small areas. And so to make that small garden space seem larger than it actually is, I tend to grow tall plants. I use a lot of verticality in my garden. I jam those plants in there, and they're tall. And I use the trellises to go up, I use the arbors to go up. Because the garden is so heavily planted and there are so many intricate layers of it, it really creates an illusion of much greater depth.
The garden may be relatively new, but Birgit herself has a long history with the property. Her parents first moved there from Germany when Birgit was just 5 years old.
We came here in '65, and Mom and Dad's marriage didn't last much longer than that, probably less than a year. Dad and I lived in boarding houses. We were very poor. And one day this house came on the market. So Dad managed to borrow the down payment from his father in Germany and was able to purchase the house. We had a tenant living downstairs with us, a boarder, and we had tenants upstairs, and that helped pay for the mortgage.
In those days, the property was unremarkable. For Birgit's father, there was no time to even contemplate gardening, and for Birgit, adolescence was proving to be more than she could bear. Growing and nurturing anything, including herself, was the farthest thing from her mind.
I had quite a troubled teenage time, as many people do. It started when I was 13. I was sexually abused at a party, and that just kind of spun me off into this craziness.
Following the senseless death of a close friend, Birgit's life began to unravel.
I got mixed up with the wrong crowd, drugs, alcohol, not really paying attention at school anymore.
As she neared the end of her teens, Birgit began to slowly put herself together. She and her first husband traveled the world, but Birgit returned to British Columbia single, determined to start afresh. However, an abusive relationship derailed her plans.
It was a very low period in my life. I was very shy. I had very little self-confidence. I was convinced that no one else would have me, which is why I stayed with this fellow for so long. He had me ground down to a little nubbin. And so I finally got the courage to leave, and I did.
A job as a pharmaceutical sales rep took her from Victoria to the interior of British Columbia. Although she struggled to make it work, Birgit found herself alone and newly pregnant, isolated from friends and family in this remote community. After a miscarriage, Birgit wasn't sure she had the strength to go on.
I was very down, and I was, trying to make a go of it, but I was just tired. I didn't have the strength to carry on my own. And when my second husband, Richard, started pursuing me, I just kind of gave in.
Richard brought Birgit back to Victoria, and at her request, back to the house where she grew up. But it wasn't the house that brought Birgit peace.
I had no idea how far the garden was going to take me, how it was going to change me. When I began the garden, I was broken, mentally, emotionally. I felt perhaps not that I'd wasted my life to this point, but certainly that I had not lived it as I should have, or as I might have, had I not made some of the bad choices that I have made. So when I started gardening, it was like this huge passion. It just consumed me and grabbed hold of me, wouldn't let me go. And for the very first time, I felt a really strong sense of purpose and commitment to something.
Although she had never before gardened, Birgit immersed herself. She trimmed hedges back and cut down trees and began planting and replanting with a passion.
When Birgit started the garden, it looked so beautiful the first year. In fall I came, and she had dug up every plant. And she was covered in mud because it was raining already. I said, "What are you doing?" "Oh, it doesn't look right. I have to rearrange it."
The last year that I did that, it took me 2 months to get the final plant back into the ground. And during that time, they weren't planted into something. They were just lying exposed, roots exposed to the sun, the wind, the rain, the frost. And I would hose them down now and then. And I rarely lost a plant. And that was really the only way that I could really get to where I am now, to really understand the process and to be able to change. I'm always tweaking the garden. The garden is never perfect for me.
While Birgit's garden grew and thrived, her marriage did anything but.
It was a very traditional marriage. I mean, I was such a housewife. I mean, that man got, a latte in bed every morning, breakfast in bed. I ironed his clothes. I made his lunch. I drove him to work. I did all the housework, everything. He came home. I made dinner, and he sat down and watched television, and that was it. Like, I was bored out of my mind. Sorry, Richard, but I was.
Unhappy in her married life, the garden increasingly became a place Birgit could turn to for emotional and physical respite. It was a personal project and a private place, until one day, an eccentric woman showed up at Birgit's gate with what would prove to be a life-changing proposition.
Here, come on in. Look at this. Come on. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, I know. We've had such a strange...
Every week, a group of international horticultural enthusiasts arrive on Birgit's doorstep.
And the white lilac at the corner of the house that's looking so beautiful and sculptural now, they're the only 2 original plantings to the house. This area, a small garden to start with. The fencing came in because I had a little puppy and I wanted to keep him safe.
Victoria Garden tours begin at the Grand Gardens of Government House and continue on to Emily Carr's house nearby. It's illustrious company for a private home garden.
For me, gardening is a full contact body sport. I'm clean right now. Sometimes I have dirt in my teeth and in my ears and all over. So, yeah, but I like to work, obviously. Not always in the right way, but anyways.
I think what makes this garden special is its interpretation of nature. In the back, we have the wonderful color and fragrance and movement and naturalness And then we end up with the formality and the interpretation of the air of the house and the wonderful artistry of Birgit's sculptures. So we have nature and we have man's creativity all blended together in a way that reflects the history of the home, and it honors that heritage.
So they're very subtle details, but I think they lend to the overall effect of the garden. I mean, even though you're not consciously picking
Really,
them
the
up.
garden, what the garden is, it's an external manifestation of all the best bits that are inside me. And when people started recognizing the garden for what it was and telling me how beautiful it was, and it was impossible not to see the beauty within, because I was the one who had created that garden. And so I gained confidence. I realized that I was a very capable woman after all.
Now, what's going to happen here, because this front area at this time of the year is so narrow?
At first, Birgit was a bit shy. It's hard for me to remember now, she used to be shy in talking to people. And she was confident with what she had done and was developing a clear vision of the garden in the future. And I think was eager to share it with the visitors. But there was just that initial hesitation on her part.
She's my very first one, yeah.
But Birgit was never shy about her commitment to the garden. She worked tirelessly and, some might say, obsessively in her quest for perfection.
Okay, so we're just about to go into this front section of the garden. There are two more garden areas here. You'll notice right away upon entering that it's quite a different style. The texture is different, the colors are brighter, there's hot oranges and pinks and reds. The back is more pastel, a lot of purples and blues, some pinks and soft whites.
Birgit can be so intense in looking for just the right effect that sometimes she's focusing so hard on the improvements that she feels she needs to make. She misses the beauty that's already there, but she's such a perfectionist, so she'll go at it. And then when she's redone that part, you look and you see that she was absolutely right, that whatever it was did need to be redone, so that she has such a high standard for the garden. And of course, there's the pressure of the maintenance and the watering.
But the garden wasn't the only source of pressure in Birgit's life.
Last year was a particularly difficult one for me. A number of things were going on. It was discovered that I had an enormous fibroid in my uterus, the size of a small cantaloupe, and I was in a lot of pain as a result. I also had a lot of pressure on the garden. There were 2 magazine articles being done and 2 or 3 television things were happening as well. So the garden had to look good. And it's particularly challenging to get the garden ready for a still photographer. Every single thing has to be perfect. And then on top of all of that, it happened, I guess it was summer solstice last year. There was a shift that happened in me, and I realized that I had to get out of my marriage finally. And I didn't know how I was going to do that exactly. I didn't have any savings. I didn't have a job. It took me a while to actually work up the courage to do that whilst dealing with all of these other things at the same time. It was incredible. Every book that I opened, every book that I read, there were signs that seemed to be directed right at me. Signs saying that, yes, you are doing the right thing. And on the last day, when I'd finally decided to tell Richard, I met a woman, and we were just having a conversation. And then she took my hand, and she said, God will provide. And for me, that was a very powerful moment, because my biggest fear at that point was the financial fear, because I had nothing. I had no safety net. If I left this man, I was just stepping off the edge. There was nothing to catch me.
Birgit has only recently begun to think of herself as an artist, and her very first canvas was her garden.
I guess I dabbled a little bit in art when I was younger and over the years, but not really in any serious kind of way. I was more of sort of a crafty person. I designed dresses for myself. I made quilts and that sort of thing, but never thought of myself as an artist. ever. I don't have any formal training, don't know much about art at all.
The reactions she received from other artists gave her the encouragement she needed to continue on this creative path.
Alan Mandel came to do my garden for the first time, I guess 2 years ago now. He's an amazing photographer, and he really recognized that the garden was something special. You know, he said right away that it was a garden worthy of international attention, you know, and I thought, wow, what are you talking about? This is just my little thing that I do. He showed me that I was actually creating a piece of art, you know, that I did have this talent for it. It wasn't just my garden that I worked so hard on, it was something that other people would really appreciate and want to know about and to see. So he was quite influential in that, just a little shift in my own self-confidence and awareness of my own abilities.
Birgit's art was the fulfillment of a creative urge, and it was also to become the economic center around which she would build her newly single life.
I've said to myself, I'm going to give myself 2 years to try to make it as a sculptor. I have some connections in the gardening community. A lot of my pieces work outside and inside, so I think that there's really there's a need for garden art. And I know that the designers here on the island are screaming for original sculpture and original containers as well, which I can build.
She is one of the few people where the brain is totally, left and right is totally balanced. She's scientific, she is right there, she knows all the Latin names for all her plants, and the artistic side in her is totally developed too. So I have never really met anybody where both sides are so balanced.
Making a living as an artist can be challenging, but perhaps it is this balance that is helping Birgit achieve success. Today, she is delivering a statue to Souk Harbour House, an exclusive resort north of Victoria. This is a big break for Birgit, allowing her art to be seen and bought by the resort's wealthy international clientele.
The garden has really taught me a lot about me. And the garden has also taught me that I am, in fact, an artist. It taught me about form and color and texture and composition. It's brought me to this point where I feel like I'm on the threshold of something. I'm so excited about the future. The future is shiny.
Her divorce not yet final, Birgit has surprised everyone, including herself, by falling madly in love.
Matt and I met through mutual friends, and I'd always had a sweet spot for him. He's a very interesting person and just lovely and sweet and kind and everything.
I fell in love with Birgit's garden before I ever saw her or met her. I mean, it was just, you know, even although it's progressed since then, it was amazing. And just the amount, the obvious amount of work that went into it was really impressive. I was looking for someone, and I had no idea that I would get involved with somebody that I wouldn't just love, but would really admire, you know. Her work ethic and her work as a designer in the garden are just amazing, you know.
As a working artist himself, Matt recognizes and supports Birgit's creative efforts in the studio and in the garden.
He's the very first person whose creative input into the garden I welcome. And we have already collaborated on a couple of things together. And I think that it's going to be a fabulous marriage in all kinds of different ways.
I feel that's fairly rare in my experience for artists to be able to really collaborate much at all. There's a certain selflessness that's involved in that, and lack of ego. And we bring such divergent experience and expertise to the process that I think there some really interesting things that we couldn't possibly predict now will come of our working collaboratively. I guess I thought that relationships like this were the stuff of fairy tales more than reality. And I'm finding that my relationship with Birgit is an inspiration and is transforming me as well, being around her and her garden.
Birgit is very happy now. She's come to a point in her life where she's very content and happy. And it's so good to see, because that's all what a parent really wants.
The garden has brought me to myself, is what's happened. It's been a bit of a journey, but I finally feel that I am the person that I was meant to be. I feel like I'm living my dream now. You know, I'm just stepping into that now after having gone through all this stuff, and I realize that now that I had to go through all of the things that I went through to become who I am at this very moment in time, so that I could go on to the next step, which is really where I want to be.